Hello and welcome back to the channel. Today I want to talk about something that's been on my mind for a long while. The evolution of One Piece's artwork and general presentation. Before we begin, I'd like to preface that this is entirely my own perspective and I really want to hear what you all think as well. So if you have the time and energy, please drop your opinions in the comments below because I genuinely want this to be a discussion. Here's where I stand. For me, presentation is the single most important element of storytelling. Not just visually, but mechanically as well. The way something is told, the how, resonates with me more than the what. You can have these amazing characters and concepts, but if they're delivered poorly, they will often pale in comparison to lesser characters and concepts that are well presented. That is my personal stance, and it's important for me to establish that here and now, as my take on this entire topic is massively colored by this perspective. One Piece's presentation has shifted over the years, and today I want to examine what's changed, why it's changed, and how those changes have affected the way we engage with this legendary story. Let's start by establishing something I find incredibly integral to the topic. One Piece's unbelievable success as Eiichiro Oda's intellectual property. One Piece is the best-selling manga of all time by a ridiculous margin. It's the undisputed face of Weekly Shonen Jump, the #1 manga magazine in the world, an environment so competitive and sought after that simply entering the magazine's pages is enough to position you as the cream of the crop. And One Piece reigns atop its throne and has done so for over 2 decades. It is literally the king of kings in the world of manga. Yet, I deliberately referred to One Piece as Oda's IP because even though it's unrivaled as a manga, One Piece has become so much more than just a manga. It's an anime, it's a film franchise, it's a collection of data books and novels, it's one of the most successful Netflix live-action series ever, it's merchandise, theme park attractions, collaborations, you name it. In Japan especially, One Piece is a cultural staple. The weekly chapter release is almost like a ritual for millions of fans. It's like watching your favorite sports team every time they have a game. And with that level of cultural impact, Eiichiro Oda isn't just drawing comics anymore. He's essentially maintaining a national institution. And in recent years, especially since the pandemic, this impact has become global. 10 years ago, I'd be surprised to see somebody wearing One Piece merch in public. Now I'm surprised if I leave the house and don't see anybody wearing something with the straw hat on it. One Piece is a Goliath in pop culture, and that kind of success comes with expectations, and that pressure, that demand, plays a huge role in what I want to talk about today. In every medium, storytelling can be broken down into 2 fundamental components: content and presentation. Content is the story itself, the characters, the plot, the world building, the what. Presentation is the means in which that content is delivered. In film, you have acting, cinematography, or directing. In books, you have prose. In anime, you have art, voice acting, and animation. In manga, you have paneling, pacing, flow, use of space, dialogue, visual rhythm. While I did just list visual components, presentation runs much deeper. A lot of people conflate manga presentation with just good art, but it's more than that. Presentation can also be logistical. It's about how the reader experiences what's being told. Are the panels easy to follow and understand? Are the characters getting the time and care they deserve? Is the pacing good and complementary? It's not just visual, but structural too. Essentially, is the content being delivered in a way that maximizes its impact? In my opinion, the best stories harmonize content and presentation, and I believe One Piece in its prime was one of the greatest examples of this harmony. Let's talk early One Piece. Most of pre-timeskip art, especially in arcs like Skypiea, was just magical. There was a real commitment to flow, paneling that guided your eyes effortlessly from moment to moment. Splash pages were frequent, larger panels gave space for emotions and scenery to breathe, the attention to visual atmosphere always felt painstaking and deliberate. While it's nigh impossible to limit One Piece to a single genre, at its heart this is an adventure fantasy, a story about exploring the unknown. And all aspects of presentation reflected that. Wide, immersive shots, clever pacing that sped up and slowed down when appropriate, layouts that encouraged the reader to linger on the pages. This was especially important in arcs centered around wonder and discovery. Skypiea is the poster child for this, a big reason why it's my favorite arc. Reading through it and exploring the civilization in the sky alongside the Straw Hats made me feel like I was right there with them. And that wasn't just because of the content, it's because of how Oda presented things. While rereading those earlier portions of the story, I can easily get lost in them. I can't tell you how many times I've gone back to reread a single chapter and ended up sitting there for a few hours having read more like 30. Now let's talk about how things have changed, slowly but surely, over the years. First, I'd like to make one thing absolutely clear. Oda's skill as an artist has absolutely not declined. In fact, I'd argue it's improved drastically. Every now and then, he'll drop a page that's so wonderfully drawn, so visually stunning, it rivals and often even surpasses the best of my personal favorite era of his art, which is Skypiea. The man still has it, but the difference is that those pages, which are now rare, were once the norm. That was how every page looked. Everything felt like it was being presented with a deliberate and distinct artistic vision. It doesn't feel like that anymore. And it's not because Oda has lost passion or ability, it's because he simply doesn't have the time and space to draw like that anymore. The scale of the story, the pace of the serialization, and the sheer volume of content he's trying to deliver, it all adds up. The shift from thin, meticulous line work in the early story to much thicker lines in post-time skip feels to me like a deliberate attempt from Oda to buy himself more time. Thicker lines means there's less to draw. And while this isn't necessarily a bad thing, I think it's very telling that there were 0 full single panel double spreads between chapters 801 and 1110. That's almost 10 full years, by the way. Most of my personal favorite spreads in One Piece are not full single panel ones, so this isn't something I completely hate, but I think it illustrates how conservative Oda has to be with page space. He doesn't have the freedom to dedicate 2 full pages to a single panel anywhere near as often anymore, which is one of the most visually impactful tools in the medium. These days, Oda is cramming what feels like 30 pages worth of story into just 16 or so pages. He has personally expressed a desire for more space in multiple interviews and statements, and that result is dense panels, faster transitions, and a significantly more cluttered layout. You don't get as many quiet moments, you don't get as many grand moments. The pacing can sometimes feel rushed, and it can sometimes feel slow. I don't feel anywhere near as much attention to detail when it comes to presentation as there was in the past. Instead, it feels like Oda is trying to make the thickest chapters possible, and clarity often takes a hit, which is especially noticeable in fight scenes. I often have to reread panels multiple times just to figure out what's going on. The visual flow isn't there for me. But these aren't new talking points. Many people have expressed their thoughts on One Piece's evolution in presentation, the good and the bad of it. If you're on Twitter and you haven't seen the Tetris memes, then are you even really on Twitter? This is a big discussion in the One Piece community, but I think I have a fresh perspective to share. This next part is the entire reason I even wanted to make this video. After thinking about this for literally several years, and very much hating the recent presentation in much of that time, I don't think this is all bad. One Piece is uniquely designed for the weekly manga experience, unlike any other manga I have ever seen or heard of. It's one of the only series where almost every single chapter feels eventful. And there are over 1100. You never walk away feeling like nothing happened. And that's the most positive consequence of this evolution. That wasn't true for pre-time skip. There were definitely chapters where, it's cool, there's some nice interactions, there's good stuff, but it wasn't really a bombshell. It wasn't crazy hype. The density is more unique to post-time skip, and especially everything since Dressrosa. That density is what keeps fans engaged week after week. I know so many people who prefer binging, so they let their favorite weekly series stack up and come back to it, but they'll never do that with One Piece because they never want to miss a chapter. For a series that's been running for over 2 decades, it has only gained momentum, and that's an incredible feat. So yeah, the presentation has taken a hit, but the weekly experience has been elevated significantly because of it. It's a sacrifice made in service of the scope and scale the story is constantly expanding, and in the context of weekly serialization, it's not only understandable, but absolutely necessary if Oda wants to finish One Piece in this lifetime. And as I said, One Piece is not just a manga. Arguably just as crucial to the series' identity is the anime adaptation. There is an abundance of original content which fills in the little gaps left by the manga's breakneck pacing. With more time, better production, and the benefit of hindsight, the anime can slow things down, add emphasis, and let moments breathe. Not to mention, it is a Sakuga fest with some of the most talented animators and directors in the entire industry, pouring their hearts and soul into so many of the story's peaks. Compare Zoro vs. King in the manga to the anime. from a pure presentation perspective. Somehow this weekly adaptation is not only competing with, but outshining most seasonal anime. We're truly blessed to have an adaptation with so much love and care going into it, even if it does have a fair share of issues of its own, namely pacing. And speaking of pacing, I do wonder if Oda may sometimes be adjusting his manga output to support the anime, which is now closer to the manga than ever before. Toei recently had to take a 6-month break to avoid catching up. That's never happened before. People often criticize the pace of the One Piece anime by bringing up the fact that they are adapting less than a chapter's worth of content in many episodes. And that does sound egregious, especially when compared to other anime that typically adapt 3 to 4 chapters per episode. But the source material in those cases are not even remotely as dense as One Piece. A single One Piece chapter often does have 3 to 4 times more content than a single chapter of something like Jujutsu Kaisen or Bleach. So that's another big benefit of the density of content per chapter of the manga, and I can't help but speculate that this is an intended thing from Oda himself and the rest of his team. At the same time, Oda has been juggling the Netflix live-action series, supervising the production of things like data books, Vivre cards, and light novels. The man's carrying several versions of the same story across multiple mediums, and that pressure inevitably impacts his ability to be as mindful and as creative as he would be otherwise when drawing the manga. I guess what I'm saying is that Oda is kinda suffering from success. Imagine if Oda wasn't publishing weekly. Imagine he released things in bigger batches, like a full volume every 6 months or so. He'd have more time to draft, reflect, cut out unnecessary bits, and polish every chapter. The story would be tighter, the presentation cleaner, the art perhaps more consistent. But then One Piece wouldn't be the same One Piece anymore. The story is indulgent by design, it's a part of the charm. It's sprawling, it's messy, it's alive. And that's because Oda packs every single thing he loves and cares about into it. One Piece is a canvas for his entire personality, his eclectic interests and obsessions, which, like any of us, grow and develop over the years. So every single chapter, every single wacky new idea, every single gag and seemingly unnecessary bit of fluff in the pages is a snapshot of Eiichiro Oda at that point in his life. The result is a story that can sometimes be too big for its own good, that could definitely be much tighter and more efficient, that may lose me sometimes, but a story undeniably unparalleled in the realm of manga when it comes to scope and ambition. Each arc functions like its own film in Oda's cinematic universe. Impel Down is a high-stakes prison break, complete with escalating levels of danger and a reunion of past foes. Enies Lobby is a war against the world government, carried out on an eerie island with emotional weight in spades. Arabasta is about stopping a civil war orchestrated by a manipulative tyrant, a desert kingdom fantasy that channels ancient empires and revolutionary politics. The sequel, Dressrosa, is a nation already ruled by a tyrant. This time the Straw Hats aren't preventing like they did in Arabasta, they're fixing. They liberate a people already under the heel of a smiling dictator. And you could say unique things about every single arc. Each one is its own film. Each setting, each tone, each conflict is Oda indulging in a new genre, a new cinematic world, allowing his story to grow horizontally as much as it grows vertically. I've always said that One Piece might not have the most depth for me, but it is absolutely unparalleled in breadth. So I guess my ultimate point is that Eiichiro Oda is nerfed. He's doing the best he can with an impossible workload. And you could definitely argue that his very indulgent approach to storytelling, while very crucial to the story's identity, is a big problem. He sets himself these impossible demands by packing in all of his ideas and constantly expanding the scope. But the sheer attempt of doing something of such a magnitude is astonishing in of itself. One Piece is as successful and beloved as it is when it's nowhere near max potential. The fan favorites arc, one of the greatest of all time, Marineford itself, is half of what it could have been if Oda had the freedom to draw everything that was in his head. And sure, that's a damn shame, but it just goes to show the sheer ambition going into this story. It is an unrivaled feat, and there is no doubt in my mind that we will never see anything like One Piece, especially in the world of manga. So yeah, I missed the old presentation. I miss the flawless flow, the visual clarity, the sense of space, the thinner line work that is so much more appealing to the eyes. I miss the old days. But I also appreciate why things have become the way they are, and that One Piece may never finish if this evolution didn't take place. Presentation will always be the most important aspect of storytelling for me. It's how I connect to a world. It's how I feel what the characters feel. It's the how that makes the what matter. For instance, chapter 1000, while amazing, is nowhere near the top of my favorite chapters in One Piece. But episode 1015, which literally adapts that very chapter, yeah, that's my single favorite anime episode of all time. Like, that alone should convey the importance of presentation for me. But this is all just my take. I've spoken with others who love and actually prefer the density of modern One Piece, and it's more than understandable. The amount of things to chew on packed into each chapter is massive. So I ask, what's your take? Do you prefer the current art style? Do you miss the old days? Or do you think both have their place? Let me know in the comments, and thanks for watching. As always, I will see you in the next one.